One of the most interesting parts of Inuyasha is definitely the weapons. It's pretty hard to think of the series without immediately jumping to things like the Saga or the Sega. They are as iconic to the franchise as the Shikon Jewel, the Robe of the Fire Rat, or other secondary aspects like, I don't know, Shippo. So today we're going to be discussing my 10 favorite weapons in the Inuyasha franchise. This is not a list of the strongest weapons, and it's not even a list of the coolest, they're just the ones that I like the most. So be sure to leave your own list in the comments down below. If you enjoy these top 10s and you want to see more of them on this channel, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You can also check out the description for a link to my Twitch, my Discord, and the Patreon if you're looking to support the channel a little bit extra or to get involved in the community. Finally, you can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at AxelBeats. But with all of that being said, let's get into it. So there are a few honorable mentions that I won't go too heavily into, but I think were really cool weapons. I love the historical inspiration behind each of the girls' weapons in Yashahime, but my favorite of the three is probably Toa's Kikujumonji. It's a bit of a cliche, but something about fighting with a broken sword is still really cool to me. I also really like Jaken's Staff of Two Heads. I think that's really fitting for his character. And finally, Jakotsu's Jakotsuto was basically a whip-like sword, which is always cool. Both of the latter really stand out in terms of design and use, and they had a really big impact on me when I was watching. That said, ain't nobody gonna click on a top 15 list, so let's get into the top 10. Starting off the real list, we have Kohaku's Kusarigama. The weapon is a little bit basic, and it doesn't have much history or mythology behind it, especially in contrast to something like Setsuna's Kanamitsu no Tomoe, but something about this weapon was always just so damn interesting to watch. The majority of the weapons in the series are rigid. You have swords, naginata, a staff, a boomerang, and things like that, right? But they aren't very fluid weapons. They're very straightforward. But then you have the Kusarigama. Just by the fact that it's a sickle on a chain, it doesn't have to move in a very straightforward manner. On top of that, it has a ton of utility, being used for both hand-to-hand combat and ranged attacks, as well as having the ability to wrap or bind its opponent, or in emergencies even being used for defense as well. Like when we think of versatility in Inuyasha weapons, we might jump to the Tessaiga. A ton of different forms and uses, and there's a lot to it. But when we look back at the Kusarigama, that's just how it comes. It isn't so much that the weapon gives you options based on having many forms or abilities, it all just comes down to how creative the user is, and I just really like that. On top of that, Kohaku is a super tragic character, and I always love those. And yes, the weapon did get an upgrade at the end of the final act, however, we unfortunately haven't really seen it put to too much use. But I am hoping we'll get a better look at it in the remaining bits of Yashahime. Number 9 is another Demon Slayer weapon, previously belonging to Best Girl Songo and now belonging to Hisui, that being Hiraikotsu. Hiraikotsu is basically a big-ass boomerang, and it allows for both ranged and close combat attacks if you're as strong as Songo, which unfortunately I think that takes Miroku out of the running. It can also be used as a shield in a much more effective way than the Kusarigama could because it's so much bigger and more durable. Honestly, Hiraikotsu and the Kusarigama are pretty close in my head, however, because we spent so much more time with Hiraikotsu and because Songo used it, it definitely gets the upper hand for me. That said, Hiraikotsu also gets an upgrade later in the story, and it's a pretty damn strong one. After being reforged, Hiraikotsu gets the ability to disperse miasma and demonic energy, as well as stopping healing effects, becoming one of the most effective ways in dealing with enemies like Naraku. In the number 8 spot, we have Tokijin. Listen, I'm a basic bitch. I see a cursed sword, I like a cursed sword. On top of that, it comes from one of my favorite of Naraku's incarnations, Goshinki. I love that this weapon is made from one of the first demons that really overpowered Inuyasha and forced him to go into his demonic mode. And now you can add on to all of that Sesshomaru had this created by Totosai's evil apprentice Kaijimbo so that he could overpower Inuyasha. Like, as a dude who loves edgy themes in anime, come on, this is cool as hell. Every single element of this sword coming into existence and how it came to be used was just so cool. And then Kaijimbo becomes possessed by it, it gets stuck in the ground, almost like King Arthur's sword in the stone, and there's just so much evil aura that no one can even touch it. But then Sesshomaru walks up with no effort and just picks it up like it's literally nothing. All of that just works so well, and we haven't even gotten into Tokijin's abilities. To this point in the story, we've seen swords have things like the Wind Scar, which is a crazy big attack. But then Tokijin comes out with these small needle-like attacks, that are just so much more simple and elegant in contrast. Sesshomaru didn't need to blow up the land to take care of enemies, he would just point the sword at whoever he was trying to eliminate and they would be eliminated. But that isn't to say he didn't have bigger attacks as well. He could use energy slashes or even if need be the Soryuha, a giant blue dragon wave made of what looks like lightning. And like, come on, how could you not love this weapon? In the number 7 spot, we have Bonriyu, the massive halberd wielded by Bonkotsu, the leader of the Band of Seven. Coming back from the Tokijin, Bonriyu seems a little bit more simple in contrast, but honestly, I think that's to its benefit. Something about the simplicity of just having this big badass blade at the end of a stick was always both so funny and so cool all at once. And I loved the scene where Bonkotsu basically takes out an entire enemy fortress completely unarmed to steal it back as its introduction, showing that he was a monster without it, and just leaving the idea of how much more powerful he would be now that he had it. What I truly liked most about this weapon though was the kind of deal with the devil that Bonkotsu made with it. If he killed 1,000 humans and 1,000 demons, the sword would transform. There are very few literary concepts that I adore as much as Faustian bargains, and that is one of the main pulls to Inuyasha as a series for me as a whole, which I explained in my Philosophy of Inuyasha video. Bonkotsu makes this deal with the weapon to make it more powerful, and it would eventually be his own undoing. By infusing Bonriyu with demonic energy and the Shikon jewel shards, he would enable Inuyasha to use the backlash wave and take him out immediately. Literally, his wish to become stronger being granted was his only weakness. And goddamn, do I eat that shit up. Number 6 is a bit of a different choice for me, and it might surprise you, but it's gonna go to Kanos Mirror. The theme of mirrors, souls, defensive weapons, and the void all being encompassed in one weapon. It is just about everything I love. If you know anything about my taste in weapons, you know it is almost my favorite thing when defensive tools are used in offensive ways, and Kanos Mirror is just about the epitome of that. Being able to repel things like the Wind Scar, absorb souls, and possess people is just so damn interesting. It's also been seen to spy on people through the Saimyosho, create light beams to cause damage, recreate the Tessaiga, or even turn into a giant mirror golem. For such a simple tool, this mirror was filled to the goddamn brim with interesting abilities that made this little girl an absolute threat. And while it never really felt like Kana was going to be the real issue and kill everyone, just her being present was such a limit on everyone else. Like if Inuyasha wanted to use the Wind Scar, it could be redirected, so it added that sense that he needed to be careful. Now, number 5 is probably going to be the most surprising and possibly upsetting for people. But we are putting the Tessaiga here. I know. Honestly, I think just because it became such a core part of the series, it might have been made less special because of that. I don't know. That said, it is still my number 5, so I obviously do like it a lot. And we all know the story of the sword at this point. It was forged by Totosai from one of Toga's fangs, and it was known to take out 100 demons in one slice through the Wind Scar. It also acted as a seal for Inuyasha's demonic yoki, to stop him from being overwhelmed. Toga created both swords and passed them on to his kids, hoping to give them what they needed, with Inuyasha being given the Tessaiga as a means of protecting himself, as he knew that as a Hanyo he would probably have a bitch of a time going through life. The Tessaiga has a few forms which all offer a bunch of versatility. In its base form it looks like a rusty old katana, but in its true form it expands to be a massive heavy blade, and the Wind Scar and Backlash Wave abilities are both enabled. Not to mention its most versatile skill, which allows it to absorb the skills of other yokai that it destroys, which leads to its other forms. The barrier-destroying Red Tessaiga, the adamant-blasting Diamond Tessaiga, the yoki-destroying Dragon Scale Tessaiga, the flaming Tessaiga, and the Mado-slashing Black Tessaiga. There are so many unique uses and designs for the sword that it's impossible not to like at least one of them. But let's be real, as cool as the Tessaiga is, it doesn't stand up at all to our number 4, the Tenseiga. Yeah, it's cool that the Tessaiga can destroy things and absorb things and whatever, but at the end of the day, it's just another Unga Boonga weapon. But the Tenseiga, let's be real, this is the absolute coolest of the twin swords. Again, forged from one of Toga's teeth, but this one would be given to Sesshomaru to help him develop compassion. While Sesshomaru is a ton more powerful than his brother, especially at the time, he was given the Sword of Healing rather than the Sword of Destruction. If Tessaiga can kill 100 demons in one swing, then the Tenseiga can save 100 lives in one swing. Something about a weapon that heals is just so damn interesting to me. but even more so when given to a man who has no interest in others, at least at first. Sega can bring anyone back from the dead once, allowing for some very emotional and heavy moments, which are just phenomenal and tend to be more impactful than just about anything the Saga has to offer. That said, the weapon wasn't exactly useless in combat either, as it could still deal damage to anyone who was revived or who was from the underworld. Furthermore, while it doesn't have that ability now, it was also able to create Meido in the past, which I'm a big supporter of the idea that it was just so much more fitting on the Sega than it is the Saga. A sword which is able to bring people back from the underworld, creating a passage to the underworld, makes sense to me. Just all of the contrast and uniqueness incorporated into the themes of this weapon alone are more than enough for me to put it in number 4. Kicking off our top 3, we have the weapon from the third movie, Sounga, Toga's most powerful sword, and one which has the ability to summon 100 dead souls in a single swing. This was the sword of death and hell, and my inner edgy boy is in love with it. When someone holds this sword, unless they are an absolute badass, it will completely take control of them. In the event that Toga, or someone equally great, manages to gain control of the blade though, you have access to such abilities as the Dragon Twister, a massive purple tornado that destroys everything in its path. You can reanimate anyone you kill with this weapon, create illusions, read minds, create a demonic fortress, travel between dimensions, and so much more. This sword was just designed to be overpowered, and they did it in a really good way. It didn't feel cheesy, it didn't have this bad writing around it, it was just done in a way that would make you stare at the screen and go, holy fuck. It was more like this weapon that just blew you back every time it did anything, and goddamn was it cool. And that's why it goes into the number 3 spot. Number 2 continues the trend of our holy shit this is strong weapons with the Saga. This sword is straight up designed to be powerful. We have it introduced in the scene where Sesshomaru gets his arm back and ascends to being a Dai Yokai, and soon after we see Byakuya coming at him with this army of demons, which Sesshomaru takes out entirely with one swing as this massive green energy spreads through them and explodes through the clouds. This weapon is busted, decomposing anything it cuts or anything that the Yoki that comes from it comes into contact with, or anything that thing touches, basically becoming this bright green wave of a spreading plague of death. And I want to say there's more to it than that, but sometimes a badass sword being used by a badass is more than enough. Finally, in number 1, we have a weapon which many people might not jump to, but goddamn do I love it. And it's my video, so I get to put whatever I want, wherever I want on this list. So our number 1 in this video is Shippo's Spinning Top. Nah, but actually it's Kaguya's Mirror of Life. Like I said in the Kanos Mirror part, I love mirrors being used as weapons. And here we have one that's just a million times cooler. I've talked about it before, but let's just cover some of the more busted abilities here. Creating black holes, barriers, light whips, redirecting anything that comes at her, light blasts, granting wishes, sealing spells, housing a pocket dimension, and spying on her opponents. These are just a few of the unbelievably strong abilities this thing had. It's basically a supercharged version of Kanos Mirror, plus it has spatial abilities and all these spells to go with it. It is just so unbelievably cool, and it was never even a competition for which weapon would be my number 1. But like I said, this is just my own personal list of favorite weapons in Inuyasha and Yashahime. What are yours? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and maybe consider checking out my Discord for a bit more content. You can also follow me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/ExcellianYT for nearly daily streams at this point. And as always, a big thank you goes out to our patrons with the Dai Yokai, Aikerochu, Jacob Wiley, and Iffy Babes, our Yokai, NL Cruz, Bloodwolfmon, Jamie Heck, Joker Rose, Lucifina Akuma, and Sayo Arundel. And of course, our Hanyo, Anthony Hogan, Brunette Thrasher, Kasim Salim, Love the Kiwi, Michael Grayco, Nega Kitty, Randy Moseyman, Samantha Olsen, Savage Camel, Simon Electric, and Kiwi Dog. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, remember to stay excellent.